Hi, Rose here. Recently, I was watching a video put out by XJW Panda Tower. He was showing a video that was posted on Reddit from a recent regional convention in Puerto Rico during the final talk on Friday. So I have to thank Panda for his translation of this talk. It's regarding the 1914 teaching where Jesus was enthroned invisibly in heaven. Here's a portion of that talk, and again, many thanks to XJW Panda for translating it into English for us.
Jesús dice, cuando el Hijo del Hombre venga en su gloria y todos los ángeles con él, se sentará en su glorioso trono. Bueno, quizás esté pensando, bueno, ¿cuándo sucedió eso? Antes, hermanos, creíamos que Jesús se sentó en su glorioso trono en el 1914. Pero el conocimiento más actualizado en años no tan recientes, pero más recientes, se nos ha explicado que esto sucederá en el futuro cercano. Jesucristo se sentará en su glorioso trono después de la destrucción de todas las religiones falsas. Y justamente antes de la Armagedón, Jesús se va a sentar como juez y va a mirar el corazón mío, lo que he hecho, lo que no he hecho, la actitud. También mirará el corazón de todos los que estamos aquí presentes y de todas las naciones. Y por ende, la segunda parte del versículo 32 dice que entonces va a separar a las ovejas y las cabras.
Now, if this is true, this is a major bombshell. Let me explain. 1914 has been a cornerstone date for the Watchtower organization. Here's a quick synopsis why. The Watchtower organization has claimed that 607 BCE was the fall of Jerusalem. Their biblical stance from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was that the 2,520 years from the fall of Jerusalem added up prophetically to 1914, when Jesus was invisibly enthroned as king, which marked the beginning of the last days. And that's why Jesus came down in 1919 and chose this organization as his true channel to help honest-hearted ones know the times that we are living in. Jesus set them up to direct his true followers. The organization has used 1914 and 1919 as key dates, proving we are in the final part of the last days, also proving that Jesus chose the organization after he was enthroned as king. How many talks have we had regarding living in the last days with those dates in mind? Well, here's Stephen Letts saying this in 2020.
So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
Watchtower has for over 100 years lied about the true date of the fall of Jerusalem in 607. I've done a video regarding that, which I'll link in the description for you. 607 BCE, if you're not aware, is a date that can easily be proven wrong, both biblically and historically. However, if you tried to show your elders or write to the branch and ask them about what you had found regarding 607 being wrong, what would happen? If you continued in this line of thinking, you would be branded an apostate for thinking that way. Why? It has been taught that after Jesus was enthroned, he then looked upon all the religions in the world and chose the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society as his one true channel in 1919. Since 1919, all witnesses were told that everything taught as biblical fact by the organization was approved by God as being his true channel that, again, Jesus chose after he was enthroned in 1914, all based upon their teachings of 607 BCE. When I was young, 1914 was a key date for all older witnesses living at that time, like my grandparents, because they were being told that they were the generation that would see the end. Why? Because they're the ones that saw the beginning in 1914, when Jesus was claimed to have been enthroned. They were alive at the time to see the start of World War I and were aware of current events. They could recognize by what was happening in 1914 that Jesus was set on his throne. That's what they were being told. But since the 1970s, there have been 6 different explanations of who that generation is, up to 2010, when once again, David Splain came up with a new understanding of who that generation is. All of Jehovah's Witnesses just fell in line with this new understanding in 2010. But remember, this new light that was being explained by Splain was based on Jesus being enthroned in heaven in 1914. The video I made with all 6 different explanations will be linked in the description for you as well. You see, it's a house of cards now. If this is an actual thought the organization is testing out even in a small area in a foreign language. If, as was brought out in this talk, that Jesus will be enthroned during the Great Tribulation after the fall of Babylon the Great, or all false religions on earth, then that completely changes anything that has to do with 1914. 1914 becomes irrelevant. If 1914 is actually irrelevant, then how can there be anything that happened in 1919? If Jesus wasn't enthroned in 1914, how did he choose the organization in 1919? And if he didn't choose the organization in 1919, then has there ever been an actual faithful and discreet slave that has been supposedly been directing God's people? This just gives proof and explains all of the mistakes that this organization has made and continues to make. How many false prophecies has this organization made over the last 145 years? What about the changing blood doctrines in 1944, and then 1952, and again in the 1990s? If those are not actually coming from God, how many people died due to those men telling people that this teaching came from God? My husband's sister died because of this false teaching. How many people died because they weren't able to get an organ transplant for over a decade? I know of 2 personally who died because they weren't able to get an organ transplant that was desperately needed at that time because it was considered cannibalism. How many families have been torn apart due to this disfellowshipping arrangement if it did not actually come through God's channel of communication? How many suicides have there been because of this unbiblical, unloving practice? Is there even a generation living today that will see the end since the beginning hasn't started yet? How many people have not been able to get a higher education and now are, as many have in the past 100 years, are in their older years with no retirement because they weren't going to get old and worry about that? Because of the 1914 generation teachings. I'm looking at my parents and aunts and uncles in this situation right now. How about all of those that died in the Nazi concentration camps, or who died in Malawi in the 60s and 70s? How many other places because they listened to men who actually were not chosen in 1919? How many lies have witnesses been told as absolute truth, and if any did question these lies, were disfellowshipped for apostasy because they were not following the faithful and discreet slaves set up in 1919 when Jesus chose them in 1914. How blood guilty have those multiple men been over the last 100 years? Are the governing body themselves stating what they know about Bible truths? Here are the governing body themselves stating at the annual meeting in 2023 what they know about Bible truths.
What we're saying is that we shouldn't be dogmatic about who will and who will not be resurrected. We just don't know.
What's the answer? We simply don't know. We can't be dogmatic.
Why do they say they don't know? Because they aren't inspired, as they have admitted.
Whereas Jesus' teachings and the written word of God are inspired, the faithful and discreet slave is not inspired.
And also, the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible, and so it can err in doctrinal matters or in organizational direction.
I remember when I was first waking up to the lies that I had been given my entire life. I was talking to my dad about 607 BCE versus 587 BCE. He honestly looked at me and said, "It doesn't matter, because we know for a fact that 1914 and 1919 are key pivotal dates to Jehovah. If they make this new line of thinking about 1914, what will my parents say? They're in their mid-80s and they have believed everything since they were children. What will that do to them mentally? If this really is just a beta test by those men in New York to see how witnesses hearing this talk would react, it still shows that they don't know anything that they're talking about. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Every time there have been new men set as governing body members, doctrine has always been changed. I've seen it happen myself for over 50 years. Some that don't really affect anyone, like the separation of the sheep and the goats, which I was taught was being done when I was younger. But then that teaching changed. But this new light is going to be a hard one to swallow for all of the reasons I mentioned in this video. If the organization really does get rid of the 1914 teaching, which does away with the choosing of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society in 1919, then those men who have claimed to be authority over all witnesses' lives are liars. It's a house of cards that they won't be able to put back together. If they really do make this 1914 new light, not just for a small group of people in Puerto Rico, but for all witnesses worldwide, will that finally help people in the organization see the lies that they have been fed? Or will many just follow along like they did in 2010 with the new overlapping generation? Or even most recently with the new understanding about who will still be able to change during the Great Tribulation that they made during the 2023 annual meeting. Remember, this new line of thinking about the Great Tribulation is completely different. Before, the Great Tribulation was the cutoff date for anyone who chose not to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Remember, the message of judgment was going to happen there. Is there even going to be a message of judgment now? I'm looking around at all my family and friends just going along with this new loving understanding Jehovah has provided regarding the Great Tribulation, no counting time anymore, and beards. Will witnesses do the same if the 1914 teaching of Jesus being invisibly put on his throne is done away with? If you want to see the video regarding all the changing teachings regarding the generation of 1914, I'll put a link in the description for you. Like I said, this is a house of cards. If the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society really do away with the 1914 teaching, then everything ever taught by this organization falls as well. I guess we just need to wait and see. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped make you think. Please make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and if you're able to, please share it with others. It really helps my videos go out to a much wider audience, and as always, please take care of yourself, stay strong, and as always, thank you for watching.
This time, Jehovah has helped the faithful and discreet slave to discern deeper principles and understanding.
We just don't know.
And we shouldn't be dogmatic because we don't know.